Welcome to the Best Places to Lead show. I'm Jerry McNamara, your host. And so thanks for tuning in because we're on a mission to positively impact 5 million people over the next 4 years through better business. Now, I've never met anyone who has shown up to work and said, I really want to suck today. Yet there are so many people that are ineffective and disengaged. It's not their fault, right? It's the leader's responsibility to create a compelling company culture. And so that's why we're working with leaders on how to build compelling companies that are not only successful, but also enjoyable to work for. So we want to create a workplace where employees are so engaged and having so much fun that they're surprised that they still get paid at the end of the week. That's when we know we're winning. So when you're good at work, you have the chance to be great at home. And when you're great at home, you have the chance to be good at work. And right, that's the whole virtuous cycle of seeing people as whole people. And so I think this is going to be fun. Isaiah Rosick is in the crowd. Thanks for tuning in, Isaiah. Ish Toledo, thank you so much, Ish. It is going to be super fun. We have a great guest today. So today, I think about him like the Energizer Bunny, like total energy all the time and never short on opinion. So Matt Kleinrock's the COO of Rockway Exhibits based in Orlando, Florida. And I think you'll see has some really strong, interesting perspectives, very much a considered leader about how he wants to approach leading his company. And let me just tell you, I align with most of his views. That's why I asked him on the show. So Matt, I think as I think about this approach and where we're going to go on this show, there were a handful of things that I was thinking about when I invited you. One is you literally went from being out of business during COVID to 2 years later having your best, most profitable year ever. And I really want to unpack that because there are companies that found their way to thrive on the other side, and there are companies that are still trying to figure the way out onto the other side. And so I'd love to see how you did that. You also asked me the most thoughtful question of 2022, and I want to unpack that because we're going to dive right in. I think that hits at the heart of you being a principle-centered leader. And, you know, the other thing that I think about is you are in the marketing space, but you're also in a tired part of the marketing space. And I want to hear your thoughts on reinventing the company, the space, your point of view, because I think what you're doing is pretty cool. And watching it from afar has been a lot of fun. Answer me this one. How does a decent golfer end up in the trade show marketing space?
Cool. How do I end up in the trade show marketing space? It's a long-winded story, but it's really from a relationship, almost like anything else, right? Like a really, really good relationship that I've had since I was a kid, and then being given an opportunity to get into the industry. And I mean, there's a long story behind it, but basically I was about 25, 26 years old, didn't have a ton going on, was given an opportunity, and kind of here I am today.
I always think about this, people say, oh, he's a self-made man or self-made woman. I think that's the biggest load of baloney because all of us stand on the shoulders of giants. I know for myself. I mean, people who invested in me, mentored me, gave me opportunities. And so, I love the humility of knowing we don't do life alone. Tell me this, Matt, it's March 2020, right? You have a good business, not a great business yet. And I'm guessing that you're at TPC when the world shut down on that Thursday, because I know how much you like to golf. What's the first thing that you thought about as you started to consider the implications for Rockway?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the first thing was I thought about. It's kind of like, it's like a progression, like a super slippery slide, right? Like you're like, what's happening? You're reading about it. You almost can't believe it's happening. Then you start realizing like, oh, this is going to happen to us. When's it going to happen? How's it going to happen? And then all of a sudden, the dominoes start to fall, like even before you can gain control or make a plan, right? Like someone comes in the office and says, hey, what's their names just canceled their show. Hey, what's their names are not going. You're like, oh, wow, this is real. It happened very, very fast. And I would say it happened in the beginning of March, meaning February was still kind of like people knew it was going on, but not that people didn't take it seriously, but it didn't disrupt business just yet. And March was just like dominoes, just everything started crumbling super fast.
And so you start to see the dominoes start to crumble.
Mhm.
If you're a historian looking back at the leader of that company, which happened to be you and your partner, what are the decisions that you think about that you thought were the most critical, the most important, effective decisions to get you to a place where you're here today?
Yeah. So what's interesting is like my business partner, he's older than me, right? So he's been through more. He sort of started his first business, I wouldn't say on the back of 9/11, but right around it, right? He rolled, he had the business through what, 08, 09, 10, right? So he had way more experience than I did in these sort of like shifting times, I guess you'd call them. And what kept keeping me grounded is the fact he kept saying, like, I never seen anything like this. I never seen anything like this. And when he was saying that, for me as a first time going through something large, it really made me pay attention, right? It
Mm,
really made me pay attention because I know he'd been through some shit as a
right,
business owner, like
right.
some real stuff, so like I knew when he was like, never seen anything like this. I could tell, not that he was panicked, but he was like, I don't know here. So that was something to be considered. And that really focused all of our conversations. It made them very focus driven. It was like, what are we talking about? We tried to keep things reality, right? We tried to be super honest with ourselves. We tried to constantly talk about, you and I spoke, and I told you, like, we didn't want to err on the side of optimism. I mean, I'm a pretty optimistic guy, but in this case, and something that had such a lack of control of, and something that none of us had ever seen before, there's no way. We erred on the side of complete caution versus optimism, just because we felt like there was no other way. It was almost like pure survival mode, which most time in business, I don't want to say that people aren't in survival mode, because some people feel like they are. We were genuinely in pure survival mode, like the real type.
Yeah, and I think you're right, because I remember you called me, I think middle of the summer, maybe June, and you were like, what do you think? I was like, whoo, that is that is a hard one. I mean, your
Yeah.
business is built around bringing
Yeah.
people together, and we're now
Mhm.
being told stay away from each other, social distance at least 6 feet away. I don't know, do like the hand sanitizing stations. Like you can't do enough of them in the span
Mhm.
of making a business, especially
No.
when you're competing with people who are already in that business. And so tell me a little bit more about erring on the side of being conservative, right? I mean, that must have been like, we're immediately
Yeah.
laying people off, which
Mhm.
I mean, I think I know you well enough. That had to be a massive gut punch for you, because you're such a big culture guy. You're such a big believer in, like, do what I say I'm going to do. Otherwise, you're full of shit, and
Yeah.
you're a bag of wind. Walk me through, like, what did conservative mean to you?
Yeah. So I think one of the discussions that was key was obviously in early March, when this was seriously starting to happen. There was so much happening where people were, deciding what next, what to do. And we kept having these discussions, and we really just kept rounding to the same thing, which is like, we don't know what's going to happen, but we know how much cash we have. And then we know what our expenses are. And then we know what type of expenses we can cut. And we know what sort of expenses we're going to have to sustain for as long as we're basically a business. And when we just started doing simple math, we just said to ourselves, like, we have to get rid of 90% of the staff now, today, like not tomorrow, not a week from now. It wasn't a cold thing. Like, it was absolutely crushing, but we decided in that moment, like, okay, this is about the business surviving. The business has to survive if anybody ever wants to come back. Like, nobody can ever come back to whatever, if we felt like we thought it was good, if it doesn't survive. So a lot of companies in our industry, ones who went out of business even now, they furloughed, right? They played like a chicken and an egg game, like, oh, you'll come back. Oh, it'll be June. We didn't tell anybody that. We were like, it was a super difficult. I remember it like it was yesterday. I had everybody in our showroom. It's like everybody knew. It was brutal. It was just a brutal discussion. But I will tell you this, is the way people handled it was incredible. I mean, people were hugging me and thanking me. I was like, I just fired you, kind of in a very large setting. I basically said, hey, if I've not had a private discussion with you, we're letting everybody go. They knew why. I didn't have to explain why, right? But the way some of those people handled it, I will never forget that. People helping each other pack up their things. It was a very surreal day. I was sick to my stomach for two days, meaning literally nonstop sick to my stomach. It was awful, but we made the right call. I mean, we did.
Early in my career, I was a senior leader at a company, and we were raising venture capital. And a couple of times we had a big check in the middle of the table, and we took our eye off running the business. And we ended up $1.7 million in debt when we thought we were all headed to getting a big venture capitalist check. And one of the advisors said to me, always prefer a bloody survival over a clean death. And that has always stuck with me, that at the end of the day, you're going to have to make hard decisions. But again, if you're going to resurrect from, a really hard place, you have to sustain the core first, and then rebuild. And hopefully we can create opportunities, and people who we love, who are in our care, maybe we can invite them back. Maybe they've already found a place, or we've helped them find a place. But I think that's just a penultimate example of prefer the bloody survival over a clean death. And I was like, at first, as a young person, I was like, what does that even mean? And then it, just sunk in. Like, you're going to have to make hard decisions that aren't the decisions that you want to make. It's not the ones that you aspire to make, but it's the right decision in order to be able to find your way forward. And so
it's a great quote. It's a great quote. And it completely resonates with me in that moment. Like, we were just looking at facts. We were looking at money. We were looking at dollars. We were looking at what's going on in the world, the uncertainty. We just made a decision. We're like, we are not going to err on the side of optimism. No chance. And I typically walk the tightrope of optimism. I do. I mean, I'm skeptical as hell, but I typically walk the tightrope of optimism, and we just didn't in that moment at all. And then just made decisions, and we turned out to make the right ones. Brutal day, tough day, but we made the right call.
Isaiah Rosick, who knows you and has had a bit of, resilience inside of his company, he had sent me a question for you, because, you're not a sit on your hands type of guy, right? When you really think about that. What did you discover about your personal resilience during COVID in shepherding the company forward?
That's a really good question. What did I realize about my personal resilience? Well, I realized that I truly am resilient. Number one, I realized the reality and the human nature of extreme, and I don't want to say extreme. There's people that live in way crazier extremes than that, but for me, extreme, right? But I realized the nature of, like, there were days I woke up where I was like, we're going to shut it down, walk away. This is it. It's over. It's not, it's not like I didn't have those thoughts, but, I think I learned that we kept having conversations about the silver lining. That was always big. What could come from this? Sometimes it was tough to have those discussions, but we kept saying, like, what might this look like on the other side? And, we're talking having those discussions in the summer of 2020, in the times where you were miserable. I mean, miserable. You don't have purpose. You don't have anything. I mean, literally, you don't have anything to do. You don't have anything to do because we lost 95% of our revenue, gone, So in terms of what I learned about myself, I learned some really good lessons in leadership. I learned that I had some excellent people. I had somebody on my team actually call me out, or call me up, as you like to say, Jerry, because, March and April, I was pretty much in Orlando all the time, but I live in Jax, right? So I was traveling there. But with hotels and COVID, I was staying at one of my sales guys' house sometime. I mean, it was just brutal. And I ended up going back to Jackson. I wasn't at my office for, like, God, I want to say it was 60, 90 days. I don't recall. And on one call, my director of account management, Liz, basically just was like, hey, Matt, when are you coming to see us? Like, when are you going to be here? Because we're here every day. And not that I was doing anything less or different. It was just, I wasn't there. And I was always so grateful for her saying that, because I didn't realize it, because I was suffering on my own. at home. And I didn't want to go because I didn't want to suffer in front of them. I'm so used to being high energy, positive, leading, burying everything so nobody can see to a degree, right? That I didn't want to go. So that was a big thing, learning that I had a good team there. And then just trying to shake free of some of the demons, which everybody has in moments like that. And then trying to constantly construct a path, trying to constantly construct what's next, small wins, make sure people are talking. It was tough. It was absolutely tough.
What were the leadership lessons that you learned that you referenced? You said that was the first thing you came out and the resilience of. What were those leadership? Because you just said one of them, I think, and that is to get people talking. And I always point back to Zach Mitchell, who was my COO at a construction company, and he said to me one of the most insightful things. He said, "You're winning if your people are talking."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "You're right. That's a good one." What are those lessons for you?
I think in an extreme circumstance, which ours was, I had to let them not be perfect. I had to let them suffer. Like, everybody suffers differently. Everybody struggles with things differently. So it was odd at times. Like, the office was crazy. We were just there every single day. It was like, Lord of the Flies. I mean, it wasn't a great situation. So I think from a leadership standpoint is, we couldn't hold those like super high standards and like, the professionalism and every day is like impossible. It was just impossible. And I felt like holding people to that was also not my best bet. So I let things slide a little bit, right? Tried to keep things jovial, tried to keep them fun, tried to keep them, I would say a little bit of a lesson is learning to adjust. You have to be able to adjust to scenarios, to context, to situations. And ours was extreme at that time.
Yeah, for sure. So let's walk through, right? You make it to the other side. Holy smokes. It's amazing.
Yes.
And you have a breakout year last year. How did COVID make you a better company?
So first and foremost, right, my partner and I, he owned another company as well in New Jersey, and we were operating separately. COVID kind of gave us a really an easier way or a straightforward path of essentially merging the businesses, right? Which was a total nightmare in 21 and 22. It was very difficult to do. I don't, it's tough, but that was one. Like, that was big, being able to do that and kind of take the best of both worlds there. The other thing was just essentially during COVID and coming out, I had a lot of time to think about like what we did wrong, what I would change. Why aren't we profitable enough, right? Where do we struggle? What doesn't make sense to me? What seems odd? Like, you think about all those things, but you're not busy. So you have the time to write and whiteboard and put ideas in a phone. So that was huge. Coming out, it was like, okay, we made it this far. We made it through hell, crawling through mud, hands and knees, all that, whatever. I said, why wouldn't we make these changes? Why wouldn't we stop and make these changes? Because I'm not going back. I didn't get through all this to go back to the way it was.
Right.
So that was a big piece. And then we just started just implementing some changes aggressively and like being fully committed to those changes.
So walk me through, right? It's not like you had a bad business. You had decent.
It was a good business. Yeah.
You had a decent business, right? What are the changes that you made? Because you're different. Your business feels very different today than when I met you maybe 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And so
it is.
What were those changes that you said like that were born out of white space and sitting there and like whiteboarding things? What specifically did you come out and say, we're not going to do that, we're going to do this thing over here, and that's made an impact for you?
So I think one of my like main thoughts on that is like when you have a business and you're running a business, you get very stuck in not wanting to make drastic change. Obviously, you can only make so much change that you want, but there's some things that have to be like not negotiable, right? There's some things that people just get stuck in doing because they've always done them. that
Yep.
way, always done it this way. This is what we're used to. This is how it's supposed to be. And it's like, those are very slow moving changes when you have partners, when you have old staff, when you have all kinds of people that have been in the business for a long time, and it just takes a lot of moving and shaking to get stuff done.
Yep.
And this was a perfect excuse to do it. So some of the things were like, we weren't profitable enough. I mean, we were mid to low single digit net profit. It's not enough, right? Not worth all the stress and headache and build and everything that we're doing. Not even close. And a lot of really smart people that I talked to said, you got to be 10% plus. You want to be a good business, you got to be 10% plus. That stuck with me, right? Then trying to figure out how to do that. It was getting our finances more in line, having more dashboards, being able to fly the plane with something versus just on gut instinct, which so many small business owners do. They really don't have their shit together. They think they do, but they don't. They can't answer basic questions or know where things are at. Another thing was for us, like, we had to move up market. We were completely commoditized. We were just building people trade show booths, just, bidding on price, not really where we needed to be in our market. Right. And, if our average sale was $25,000, we sold all kind of portables for $300. We sold big trade show booths for $100. It was all over the place. So our energy wasn't focused. Our average sale wasn't good. And bottom line, we worked with too many people on too many jobs for not enough revenue and not enough profit, which is just a bad position to be in. So then we sort of reverse engineered it and said, hey, we're going to work with less customers, with better customers for more profit and more revenue. And we're going to move up market. So we focused on raising.
Let me just stop you there. There's not a business owner that I know that wouldn't love to get fewer customers at higher revenue, higher profit, right? So, okay, that's like no brainer. How did you do it though? How did you go from selling $25,000 average price point to moving up the market? Because you had to go through a process to do that. Was it better selection of clients, saying no to more disciplined things? I mean, what does that look like?
So I think it starts with how you sell your team, because you can't change your marketing overnight. So marketing's only, you know what I mean? That's like slow moving. So I try to consider what can be fastest moving. It's sales, it's prospecting, it's what they sign for, what they get signed, what they bring, what they bring in. So it was getting them on board and trying to make sure they understood the change that we were going to be making. And it's basically saying, like, we don't want to build this type of booth at this cost. And they're like, well, why? It brings in good profit. It does this. I'm like, yes, but what happens is A, B, C, and D, and trying to show them what happens. And then kind of casting a vision to them down the line of, hey, you can be here doing this if you do this. And it was getting them sold. And then once I started getting them sold, it was setting standards. It was basically saying, hey, if a company exhibits once a year and they spend $25,000 and that's it, we're not working with them. We're not working with them. If you're going to exhibit once a year, you got to spend $50,000 plus, or it's not that you're not worth our time. You don't fit where we're going.
Right.
And and then it was focusing everybody on, what are we truly looking for? What do we want? And say, hey, it's going to take time, but let's focus our attention. So it was getting our sales team sold on that and bought into it. And they did, and they were excellent. Now, we were small and mighty in these times as we rolled out, but I had buy-in and trust. So that really started to propel us. And 21 was a little better. 22 was even way better. And now 23 is even better than 22. We're still moving up market, and we don't have plans of stopping.
I love it. I think it comes back to there's two things that you said that really struck me. There are so many companies out there that get lost on what problem they solve and who they solve it for, because they're just chasing revenue. They're happy to take any deal that walks in the door.
Yes.
And not every deal is the same, right? And so
that was us.
When you start to say, here's where we win, and I've said this a million times, I've made more money in my career saying no than I have saying yes. And so being disciplined to know who we are, what we do, why we do it, and getting people aligned to that allows you to make faster decisions easier in the process. The second thing that you said, which was dashboards and getting our finances more in line.
Yeah.
Right? It's very hard to drive a car if I don't know, unless it's a Tesla, if I don't know, what the gas gauge looks like or how fast I'm going. Am I going 50 in a 25 or am I going 30 in a 25? I don't know. And so can you give me like a little bit about what you were unpacking for the dashboards to create more visibility so that you could allow people more freedom? When
Yeah.
Molly's doing a great job and selling the right deals, you're like, I'm going to get out of your way because the metrics are
Yeah.
good and you're running your business and this is fantastic because it's
Yeah.
aligned. But what dashboards did you have to put in to really give you the clarity to your business?
So we needed a multitude of things. One, we needed to change the way we were doing our finances, the mechanics of the books, basically, because the mechanics of what goes in is what gives you what comes back out that you're looking at. So that had to get changed first. Then we had to start deciding as well on like what's important, what truly matters to us. Like 20 things don't matter to a business every single week, right? Like 5 things matter to a business every week, and you have to figure out what those are for you. So for us, it was just by having conversations and frankly, trial and error, right? We built like a scorecard and it was putting a bunch of ideas there. And then as you go, you're like, well, that really not giving me anything by the week, then by the month, then by the quarter. And you start learning like, okay, what is making us go and what matters here? So dashboard is big there. From a sales standpoint, we never really built, I'd say, a sales dashboard, but we created real clarity, like I just described, over who we're going after, why we're going after, what those parameters are, and what it creates for us on the back end. The last piece was just really was the books, and it was just stopping with the guesswork. Completely stopping with the guesswork. Like this year and last year, like this year right now through April, I can almost tell you with certainty where we're going to land at the end of the year. I mean, I almost know 100% just based on projections. Now that revenue may move a little bit. We may spend a little bit more here or there, but I know what that bottom line is going to be within a 4 or 5% range. I mean, I guarantee it. I bet my life on it. And it's just a matter of where some chips fall over the next 7-8 months. That's it. And I used to not be able to do that at all.
I think that's such an important piece. I was giving a presentation last week to one of my companies, and I called it the entrepreneur's equation. Right? Business is truly a math problem. It's what are my inputs? What are my outputs? And when you say like, oh, I want this thing to happen, the what, as I always say, the what is easy. I want to do $20 million. Okay, how are you going to do it? What are all of these inputs that go into it? And all you do is just trace. I need to put 10 widgets of this thing through. I need to put 20 widgets of this thing through. And when you start to like get into your business and understand exactly what the levers are and how do I increase the velocity of that metric through skill development or through better training or bringing more people in, it just gives you such confidence in running your business. And that to me is, if I had to point to one thing, that's the thing that I feel from you, your confidence in running the business because you know your numbers and you're in control of your numbers.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so I think any advice I would give to somebody that may be struggling with it is essentially that you got to know, once you know the numbers, what it ends up becoming is then you can start to feel where the changes should be based on those numbers, right? Like I had years and years of experience of just knowing things were off. So I didn't need those numbers to make the changes for 21 and 22. I just knew that I knew they had to work. I mean, we changed so many things, but when you get those inputs correct and you can see things and you understand, it is so worth it. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It absolutely is ridiculous. And you can make the right changes.
Talk to me about going forward, right? What are you doing right now to strengthen your company as you can prepare for continued growth, right? And I think you're right in a space where there are some inflection points that happen in businesses, right where you're at. Tell me what you're thinking about or what your concerns are or what you're trying to drive forward.
So yeah, that's a really good question, Jerry. My biggest concern is, I've been doing this with 12 years now, 13 years now.
Mhm.
And it's like the biggest concern for the company is genuinely the question of what is next. Because what we're doing right now, we could keep doing. I could keep the staff. We could grow a little bit here and there. We could maximize profit. I mean, we could just stay with what we're doing and just float, right?
Mhm.
But when I think about what is next, it is, I don't want to say disrupting the industry, but it's about creating differentiation. It's about finding the hill that we're going to plant our flag on. This is us. This is what we're about. And we're different from 10 others, from 15 others. We're unique. We have a unique stance. We have a unique offering. Yes, we will still design and build trade show booths and event, materials. We've always done that. But what is that thing? What is the thing that other competitors have not thought of? That, and it all comes down to the client, the audience. What do they want? What do they need? What are the directions that they're pushing in? So for me, that's what I'm always thinking about from a vision standpoint, is trying to find that. And I've certainly not put my thumb on it just yet. And then internally, it's just building the structure to support the direction that you're going. That's a constant battle. I feel like for any growing company or a good thing, you're always trying to make sure that the structure of the business is sound and that you're doing things at a really high standard.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm going to wrap back around to some of the other questions that I had, but since you went down the road of, your point of view and being different, I mean, you're the CEO of a marketing company, and it appears to me that you've become obsessed with marketing, which I think is super cool. Like, you are a craftsman in what it is that you're doing. And I think as I look at your industry, you're realizing how vulnerable the industry is. Can you tell me about the point of view that you're taking on your industry and what it is that you're doing about it?
Yeah. So I do like marketing, right? I read a lot of marketing books. I've always liked it. I felt like I sort of built this business to a degree with my marketing attempts and efforts, I'll call them, right? There's always a constant effort there, attempts. Our stance is essentially like, and I'll tell it in my version because it's come from me. It's not about me. It's a we thing, but it's kind of how I've gotten through it. Was essentially like, I mean, I sold for a long time. I mean, I sold back in 21. I was selling when we came out of the pandemic. I was on the phone with, I'm getting proposals out the door, probably not the right way, but I was doing it just to do, because it was 9 people doing anything they could. And it's like, what baffles me is, trade show marketing and event marketing, we'll call in a whole, is about 20-40% of most companies' marketing budgets in total. Yet the way that they treat these budgets is just, it bewilders me. I mean, I've been looking at leads for 13 years that come in. We got people looking for a $50,000 spend on a trade show booth. I mean, I've seen one 2 weeks before a trade show. Legitimately 2 weeks before a trade show. I've seen that happen. Lack of strategy, lack of intention, lack of thought. Just all they want is just to get the booth at the show, And that's something that just so many of those things, RFP processes, seeing RFPs come in, the request from clients, so much stuff in that space just kind of confused me. I always thought to myself, like, man, this doesn't seem right. This doesn't seem like it adds up. And that's kind of put us on this path of saying like, hey, you should treat your trade show marketing like a channel, like any other marketing channel. That means you need to have intention, strategy, and then you need to implement an actionable plan that drives results, that betters the business. Because frankly, a lot of people don't. They just go to the trade show just to go, just to show up, just to be there, which is crazy.
Have a couple good dinners and maybe a couple nice glasses of wine and yuck it up.
Yep, get out. Exactly. And that's happens all the time.
I do find it interesting. It is almost, I'm going to use the word irresponsible. I feel like trade shows done that way, which a wide number of companies do, don't go with conscious intention, don't go with the metrics that they need to drive, don't go with the alignment of like, here was the marketing vision, the salespeople show up and we haven't communicated anything. It's like the most irresponsible use of dollars to drive an output. I mean, it's like, I always think about cash as a resource, and it's a finite resource inside every single company.
Yeah.
And you better put it on the right bets to create the right outputs.
I've had a couple really good conversations lately on my podcast about this because I'm asking and I'm trying to figure this out. And I think there's a few things to it. One, there's a ton of marketers out there that work for a company that just one day their boss comes to them and says, hey, here, you're in charge of the trade show program. So they're not really an event marketer. It's a skill. It's a talent.
Yep.
It's, so that happens a lot. So you have a person now who's just panicked because they're like, oh my God, I have even if it's $100,000, it's a big piece of somebody's budget of what they're doing. And they really genuinely don't know what they're doing until maybe they've done 5, 6, or 10 of them. Right. That's huge. The second piece I think is that, especially in my time doing this, the time running from like 2010 through or 11, 12, 16, 17, 18, like things were pretty good. So I think executives and leadership teams were not focused on these budgets. They go, they shake hands, they hang out, they go to support the doctors. They just, they're not thinking. So now I think coming out of COVID, there may be a little bit of a shift. And I'm really curious to see if it happens, because if you're going to trade shows, it should be a marketing channel. You should be finding some type of measurable, some type of business objective that you're tying yourself to, results you're driving, pipeline you're moving, something.
Brings me to like principles. I know you're a big principles guy, and just things that make sense and following through on things.
Yeah.
You talked about the importance of casting a vision, getting people galvanized and figuring out the path forward. And you said it earlier, like at your heart, you're an optimist, but you're also a skeptic.
Yeah.
So at the end of 2022, you called me with my favorite question of 2022. And I said, Matt, I'm going to call you back. I got to put the kids to bed. Then I called you back and we had a great conversation. Tell me about the question you asked, because I thought it was great.
Yeah. So I called you and I didn't really know who to talk to about it, because it's kind of a weird thing to talk to somebody about. It can come off as boastful or just, I don't know, like money's a weird thing to talk about, right? In general. And I just basically kind of told you like, hey, this is what our year looked like, bottom line. And, I've been on this mission, to create a certain type of revenue at a certain type of bottom line. And we shattered where I was on a mission to get, which was a little surprising to me, but we shattered it. And my promise to everybody, and always my discussions were, hey, when this place goes, you go. And we were going to have a profit sharing program. I wanted a company that was good enough, high enough revenue, and profitable enough that I could share it with the people that are showing up, working 40-hour weeks every week, all the time, dedicated, committed, in the trenches, working, not to give them life-changing money, but maybe to give them year-changing money, maybe to give them week-changing money, maybe to give them, they could buy a car that they couldn't go get. They could pay a bill. I don't know. So I called you and basically said, how do I do this? How do I do the profit sharing? Is it a percentage? Is it a number? Is it this is what we have, because then there's taxes, there's investments, there's so many things that have to happen from that bottom line. And that was our conversation. And
that's why it was my favorite question of 2022. Because
I like that I got that in there on you. That's great. On 22. It's awesome.
There are so many people that say, yeah, come, believe in me. A rising tide lifts all ships. Until suddenly there's a healthy bottom line and they forget all those promises that they made. And, they're soulless companies. And, if I was in the market looking for a job and, the person running it just told me that story, I would be pretty inspired to come and say, that's where I'm going to take my time and talent. And so I love you sharing that story. Give me the output of it on the other side. And that's not the reason you did it, but I've got to believe that inside the culture and rebuilding that from, hey, we didn't really have a purpose for 2 years. We stood and looked at each other and made, shitty jokes with one another. And now like we're rolling, we're profitable, we're sharing that back into the company. How has that changed or transformed the everyday attitude that you're seeing? Or maybe it hasn't.
Yeah, it was interesting, right? Because I didn't deliver all the news, right? Some of my directors were delivering the news and things like that. And I basically told them, I said, hey, when you're talking to somebody, I don't need some mandatory, like some email saying thanks. This is theirs. They earned it. It's not a gift. It's not a Christmas bonus, right? This is profit sharing. We share profit with those that help create it. It's very simple. And I was big, like I told you, I talk the talk. I want to walk the walk. I don't ever want to be somebody that's full of shit. I mean, I talk enough, right? So I got to make sure that I live up to what I say. And I'm big on that, right? It was cool. There were some instances, I mean, people crying, right? Which is just emotional to see somebody, when you write somebody a check and they cry. I mean, that's pretty crazy. So that was kind of a weird, cool feeling altogether, right? There were, people who did write me emails at my company and say like, wow, thanks or something. And just sentiment over time, you could see in January where people around the office would come up to me and like, hey, didn't expect that at all. Like that was amazing. Or hearing a story from my director about when they told somebody that they cried and said, oh, well, I needed money for this and now I can go do this, so that was a big trickle effect for me. It felt incredible, and not in a selfish way. It felt incredible in a communal way, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, we're all better
and then,
together.
I think I'm not saying that it's, since then, we've been Willy Wonka in the chocolate factory, but it's good. You know what I mean? I think we earned trust in a lot of really good people, that were like, okay, like he's not a liar. This place is legit. And I think that was big. I do feel like I've felt, and like I said, you don't give something like that or do something like that with an expectation of anything. Cause I think you can go real south that way. I had no expectations. I just knew it was, it's what I wanted to do selfishly and what I've always wanted.
And I can say that came from such a genuine place because you were honestly giddy on the phone when we were talking about it.
Yeah.
And that was super cool. And those are people that, Matt, those are the people that I want in my life that look and say, I didn't do this alone. There are a million people that have helped me along the path. And so let's share in the spoils of all of our hard work. The fact that you actually did it and followed through tells me everything that I need to know about you.
And I feel like now it's like a responsibility to keep that train going, right? Like I was clear with everybody when we did. I said, look, this is not going to happen every year. I don't know if it can, but I told them, I said, it's on me. That's my job. At the end of the day, my job is to make sure that we have a profitable, good company, right? And I mean, what else are you really, really doing at the end of the day? Yes, I'm leading and doing those other things, but that's it. I got people, they got families, they got kids, they got a livelihood, so it's, I take it seriously. And, I guess now the pressure's on.
It's the good kind of pressure though. I think
it's cool.
I think that's the point. Listen, one of the things that I think is fun is I'm not alone in this because, when I was prepping for this episode, I got to speak to a handful of, mutual associates of ours. People really see you as an inspirational leader. And that didn't come as a surprise to me, but I just wanted to give you that feedback that I think that's sometimes we don't get to see that in ourselves. How did you become such a magnetic speaker? Because I think that is certainly one of your gifts that you have. So
I've thought about this in a different sense. I appreciate the compliment for sure, right? And I appreciate anybody who says that about me. I certainly know that I talk a lot, right? So I'm conscious of that, but I do like to be positive and upbeat and optimistic. And I just think it's important, right? But I think the background on it, when I really dig deep on this stuff, and I've tried to over the years, is, when I was growing up, my grandfather owned a business, and my father and my uncle and my grandmother all work there. And I always envied I looked up to my grandfather. He was the boss. He was the man. It was his place. He was the guy. I grew up going in and out of that place, the Richards Company. And, a little bit deep down, it was a little bit of a mess at times, in the relationships with my father and, my grandfather, grandmother, uncle, all that stuff. But I watched that business very closely as a kid. I grew up in it. Right. And then my business partner, his business that he started, and him and I are very close, and, you know, we're still partners to this day. And I watched him build a business, and he was kind of like my grandfather in a way. My grandfather was like, he's the sweetest guy out of the office, but he was a hard ass. He was a salesman. He built it from nothing. He was an entrepreneur, but he ran that place hard. He treated people hard. He was like tough. And I always felt like there was a better way, just seeing it, even though I admired what he was doing. And then the same thing, you know, with my business partner, who I love, you know, I mean, he was a salesman. He had the gall to start his own business and entrepreneurial. But I watched the way that place was run for years, you know, and I always thought there was just a little bit of a better way, just a little, you know what I mean? And that's where I always felt like there's more for the people there. There's more for the community of things, the culture of things. So I think deep down, it comes down to being so involved and growing up, seeing those two very up and close, and them being close to me, not to dismiss what they did. They did incredible things. And I look up to both my grandfather, my father, you know, Paul, my partner, all that stuff. But there were things that were just instilled in me that I wanted, that I didn't think those businesses did, I guess.
I love it. Roanne wanted to know that. She was the one that asked that question. I thought that was a great one. Land the jet.
And it's a very difficult thing to do. So it's a very difficult thing to do, but
I think you're right.
Sometimes you get jaded, man. I'm telling you. I mean, you know how I am. I'm optimistic, but it's hard, you know, it's hard, you know, when you're always trying to do the right, you're trying to, you know, build culture. People use the word culture, you build, and it ain't easy. People are challenging. People are great and people are challenging. So it's, you know, you can take some kicks to the teeth while you're trying, and you can feel like you're never going to get to it. But I think at the end of the day, you have to be trying. You have to want that energy, that atmosphere, that environment. You want to be at a place where somebody wants to work there. They want to work for you. I've always felt that. I'm like, what do I have somebody that doesn't want to work for me? What must that be like? What must it be like pulling up to the office every day and being like, this guy or girl is the biggest jerk off on the planet. I like, you're walking in every day, like you can't stand the sight of them, right? Like that's got to be terrible it's got to be awful, you know? So I never wanted to be that person at all. So it's like, you have to try to cultivate it a little bit.
I think you cultivated a whole lot. And I agree with you. I joke about being Buzz Lightyear to infinity and beyond, because being Eeyore, that's not very interesting to me. And I think you got to be, you know, really real. Here's what I want you to do to land the show for us. Kim Bach sent this one in.
Oh no!
Right? So there's some.
Is it about pizza?
No.
Tell Kim I'm
no.
not answering it. Okay.
Not about pizza.
All right.
Here's the point, right? You are an inspirational leader, and some leaders don't have huge cheering sections yet, or they still battle the self-doubt. So give me the 30-second pep talk for a leader who's building something important, but isn't there yet. What would you tell them to stay focused in on?
I would tell somebody to know what you are all about. What do you want? What do you think is right? What are your views, your principles, your standards? Everybody wants to give you their opinion, but their opinion stems from their perspective. What they could accomplish, what they couldn't accomplish, bad breaks they got, good breaks they got, that's life, right? But when you want to build something and you want to do something and you see it and you think it's possible, you just don't let people tell you no. Say no when you figure out like, okay, maybe this is really impossible, right? But on your own terms. So it's like, you got to know if you got something that you want to do and you're principled in the way you want to do it and the things you believe about it, you need to be open-minded to listening to some, but you have to understand where that perspective comes from. And then you have to push super hard in the direction that you want to go. And you got to trust that essentially you will make traction, just not at the pace that you want. And some of it will be smaller and larger at different times, the traction you get.
I love it. So good. So good. Matt, how do people find you if they want to find Matt Kleinrock in their life?
Oof. LinkedIn, right? Just Matt Kleinrock, LinkedIn. I do have a TikTok. If you're on TikTok, I don't know all the how to get to me or at me on there, but my talking head is there. But I'm on TikTok. I mean, I'm everywhere. I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn, TikTok, all this stuff with my content and videos, but LinkedIn's the best place, honestly. I'm always on LinkedIn. I'm writing my content. I communicate on there. I like that platform. I use it all the time.
I love that. And tell people about your podcast, because I think you're doing a fantastic job with it.
Thank you.
Because you're focusing in on the point of view and how we can make it different, not just better, borrowing from Christopher Lochhead. But at the end of the day, I think you're doing a great job there. You should share that too.
Yeah, it's a event marketing redefined podcast. And, if you're into events, if you're into marketing, that's the stuff that we talk about. And I do enjoy that. None of that is possible without like my team as well. It takes a lot. I get a lot of help. I get to talk at this point. So.
Amen. I'm thankful for my team too. Maria,
Yeah.
Roanne, all the rest of you. Thank you so much for all of your help. Now, listen, I am on a mission, right? 5 million people over the next 4 years. I like our trajectory, velocity. We can pick it up a little bit more. And that's where I need your help. And so if you listen to our show, if you're listening on a podcast, I would love for you to rate it, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you pick it up. Or if you see the content and you say, wow, that Matt Kleinrock, he was a really good guest. I'm sure I could learn from other leaders, because we don't all have to get our teeth bashed in. So we'd love for you to share the message if you thought this content was good. Matt, I thought you were brilliant today. And so thank you so much for coming to be with us. Super fun. Listen, next week.
Jerry, Mac, thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, man. Next week, we have CEO Tyler Pygott from Lone Fur Creative. And so I really liked talking to this guy. He is super nice, super kind. He is clever. And he talked about the Eisenhower matrix that's in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, urgent and important, and how he changed that so that he would only work in his own unique genius on things that he loved. And his approach to that was super cool. And he has lots of other tips that he's had as running his own company. So I hope you guys will come next week and join us. Again, Matt, you were great. Thanks so much.
Jerry, Mac, thank you, buddy.
All right, we're off Facebook. You were great, Matt. That was so good.
It's fun. It's good.
Yeah.
I got to look at Isaiah the whole time. So I was like, I was amped up. I feel like I had to put on a show.
That was great.
What?
That was great, Matt. I have one idea for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you're trying to change the dynamic of event show marketing where it's more purposeful, more thought out, right? Where people aren't like last second, hey, can I get a booth? And they just want to get to the show and just wing it.
Yeah.
So I got a buddy that I went to college with that is the president of a company called Array.
Okay.
They used to be called Educational Measures. And what my brain is thinking is to understand how your marketing is working, you always have to measure it. You have to measure the education of what you're presenting. Are you getting it across, whatever the message you wanted it to be? So what Zach's company does is they get hired by big corporations that want to do big presentations. They want to present a new, whatever, if it's a pharmaceutical company, it's the new drug.
Yep.
And so what they do is they set up their presentation. Now, this is different than a trade show, but same kind of concept. So they have like thousands of iPads they own, and they set up basically the iPads for the event. So they're going to help the company measure the education they're presenting. And so it's live, it's interactive. And so I kind of visualize something with you where it's like at the trade shows themselves, you have a way to have a measurement of the education you're trying to get across to whoever's walking in the booth or whatever it might be, or events.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's right in line with some of there's some of that going on. Like I had a guy on my show yesterday The company's called Avolio Marketing. They're very dug into data and measurement and things like that in events. But it's an interesting play. You have to have a way of implementing it for us into the client, right? Because we can't do it for them. So we got to have a partner or something to implement. And then it's a matter, we have to pitch it. But the third prong and the big piece of it really is, are they willing? Because I think a huge part of what's wrong with the industry is that people have gotten away with just going to the trade show. They don't want to measure. Right. They don't. I mean, we Isaiah, we got a client that spends $300,000 a year with us. And we had this conversation with them. They flat told me and one of my salespeople on the phone, guys, we just don't even want to know. We don't care. We're going to go anyway. And we're like, okay, sure. Now I don't say that's the norm. I think it's more so just event marketers who are not capable, don't have the education, don't know what else is out there. And then the flip side of that is they have executive teams that have gotten a little lazy or not focused and not treating event marketing like a channel. But yeah, no, it's exactly to a degree. I mean, the big companies are doing it. I mean, really good event marketers and some of the people I've had on my show, they're measuring. I mean, there's sometimes they're making a change on the show floor day 2. I mean, they're changing a demo stand because it don't work.
That's literally what I'm thinking is like, man, if you were to partner up or somehow get set up with something like Array or something else, I could see that being like so powerful to have like data coming in and like, questions that the people, you were trying to get across that they should like red apples and they left and they said, I like green ones or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
I could see you being so dynamic in how the message is being delivered.
Yeah.
That you'd change the game completely.
Well, I think the question is too, with what you're saying is like, why wouldn't, even if you're not getting measurable results, like perfect measurable, hey, this was the ROI, like, why wouldn't you want data from what you're telling me as your client and your customer on the floor in person? So kind of twofold. Yeah, no. So I would love to talk to him. I had, this guy from Avolio Marketing on my show, but he's like super tapped into our industry and everybody. But yeah, man, we're trying to find, what's a differentiator, what's changing, what's going to disrupt our industry to a degree. That's what I'm searching for. I just don't know what it is just yet.
Well, I think, man, if you were to say, hey, Isaiah, let's do a show, and not only are we going to put together an amazing one, we're going to help you make sure the message is being delivered during the show.
Mm-hmm.
And, you think that you're selling, the greatest thing since sliced bread, but people don't understand what you're presenting.
Yeah.
Like they miss the message for whatever reason.
Yep.
But by the way, who would love that? Every entrepreneur owner in the world. You know who may not want that? Someone who got dumped the trade show to them and they were like, I don't want awareness because then I have accountability. And then it looks like I did a bad job. And so, I think you have to like figure out where you wormhole that thing in, because I don't know, the person at the front line probably is saying, I'm good. I'm like, as long as we got foot traffic and I got business cards coming in and I got a list and like, I'm good. So
it's low standards, Isaiah, is what I would say. And I'll give you there's a guy who I met. The trade show we're going to is like my industry trade show. We're going this weekend to Louisville, Kentucky. We're exhibiting ourselves, right? And I was at this trade show like 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 18, maybe something like that. And a VP for a very big company in our industry who does exactly what we do, who's been in the industry 20 years, right? He essentially, we're at a bar having a drink and I was talking about this stuff with him. This is back when. And telling him my thoughts. And he said, hey, man, let me show you something. And he drew a line graph, like an L, what do they call it? God, I'm drawing a blank. Like, when you draw
bar graph.
Yeah. Like an L chart.
Pie chart.
Yeah. Like
pie chart.
No, like chart. An L chart. Yeah, sure. And he drew it on a bar napkin. I'll never forget it. He L shape on this side, he put motivated. And on the bottom, he wrote capable. And he said to me, where do you think our client is on this chart? And I was like, oh, I don't really blah, blah, blah. He went all the way to the bottom left corner and drew a big fat circle. He said, this is 90% of the people that you're working with right here. Unmotivated and incapable. And that's kind of the, industry standard to a degree, or the sentiment, I guess is what you'd say. Interestingly enough. So trying to figure out how to crack that.
By the way, I love that. That's why I love blue collar industries, because like they're so unsophisticated that succeeding is, I don't want to call it easy, but it becomes fairly easy over time. So
you know what I think would be a huge sale on it, where they actually know, would be related to product launches. Or test products, or test messages, or, something where they're like, well, we're going to go to this trade show to see what the response is to our yellow car versus our pink car.
No, I like that.
I think it's fun. All right, boys. My son opted for extended day on Thursday and Friday, which is amazing because he usually likes to just come right home. So I've got to go get my son.
Nice, man. J Mac, thanks for having me, buddy. I appreciate it. It was a good conversation.
Thanks.
Isaiah, good to see you.